Climate Change Interagency Council, Secretary Michael S. Regan of the Department of Environmental Quality. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for attending the second Governor's Climate Change Interagency Council meeting. As you all know, we're here today to answer an urgent call with deliberate action. It's our collective job to implement Governor Cooper's Executive Order 80, aggressively addressing climate change and transitioning North Carolina to a clean 21st century economy. Now, as a reminder, under Executive Order 80, North Carolina will reduce statewide greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below the 2005 levels, increase the number of zero emission vehicles to at least 80,000, and reduce energy consumption in state-owned buildings at least 40% from 2002-2003 levels. In October of this year, along with input from stakeholders across North Carolina and across the country, the Department of Environmental Quality will present a North Carolina Clean Energy Plan. The Department of Transportation will complete a North Carolina Zero Emissions Vehicle Plan. The Department of Commerce will submit a comprehensive workforce assessment supporting the expansion of a clean energy economy. The Department of Administration will submit a North Carolina Motor Fleet Zero Emissions Vehicle Plan along with an accounting of each agency's involvement. And within the next year, we will submit the Climate Risk Assessment and Resiliency Plan, which will include the impacts of climate change on coastal communities like this one. But we're not waiting until October 15th or the end of the year to produce results. Last week, the Department of Environmental Quality released an updated North Carolina greenhouse gas emissions inventory, the first in over a decade. DEQ has also updated a comprehensive energy, water, and utility use conservation program report, providing a roadmap for reducing energy consumption in state buildings, demonstrating that since 2003, state government has decreased energy consumption by 28% and avoided $1.2 billion in utility costs, all while reducing greenhouse gas emissions equivalent to one electric power plant. So indeed, this is an intense schedule to meet an urgent need. So we're asking each of you to share in the burden of this leadership. Each of us must bring the best ideas forward while also leading in our homes, our organizations, and our communities. Climate change is one of the greatest challenges of our time, and it is up to each of us to do what is necessary to meet that challenge. So thank all of the agencies present, all of the stakeholders, for rolling up their sleeves and giving it their best. We look forward to a very productive meeting from everyone. Thank you. And with that, I'll ask the designees to introduce themselves. We'll go around the table starting with Reed.
Good morning, I'm Reed Wilson. I'm the Chief Deputy Secretary at the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and this museum is part of our department. Thanks for all coming today.
I'm Doug Holbrook. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the Department of Public Safety.
Good morning. My name is Hank Keller. I work with the Department of Information Technology.
Gary Cooper. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Contracts and Grants at the Department of Health and Human Services.
I'm Jeremy Carr, Policy Advisor in the Governor's Office.
And Sushma Masmore with DEQ as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Environment.
I'm George Sherrill. I'm with the North Carolina Department of Commerce. I'm the Chief of Staff.
I'm Mark Edwards. I'm Deputy Secretary at the North Carolina Department of Administration.
My name is Colin Miller. I'm with the Department of Transportation in their Environmental Policy Unit.
I'm Angela Altice, Assistant Secretary of Business Services and Support with the Department of Revenue.
I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. It is great to have representation from so many departments, so thank you. Now we'll transition to Jeremy Carr, and Jeremy will give an overview of Executive Order 80.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, Secretary, for the introduction. Again, I'm Jeremy Carr. Can you guys hear me okay? From the Governor's Office, I wanted to give a quick overview of Executive Order 80, as Secretary Regan indicated, it has a number of different sections to it. I'm going to break it down into 4 sections. It sets goals, statewide goals. It establishes this body here, the North Carolina Climate Change Interagency Council. It gives specific directives to a number of departments, and then gives general directives to all departments. So I'll go through each of those 4 categories in the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. The first goal is that it sets a target for North Carolina to achieve a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2025, and those are from 2005 levels. This is a target for, again, statewide emissions, not just the emission greenhouse gas footprint of state government itself, the entire state. Next, it sets a goal by 2025 to achieve 80,000 registered zero-emission vehicles in the state. Again, registered vehicles statewide, not just the state government fleet. Third, it says that it directs a reduction in energy consumption per square foot to 40% below 2002-2003 levels. There's currently a statutory requirement to achieve a 30% reduction by 2015. The governor's executive order sets a target of 40% reduction by 2025. The North Carolina Climate Change Interagency Council is comprised of the governor and the secretary of each of the governor's cabinet agencies. The governor and secretaries also can delegate their authority to designees, and so you see a number of designees here as well. Secretary Regan obviously is the chair of the council and is representing Department of Environmental Quality today. The council duties, the executive order lists a number of them. The council can recommend new and updated goals and actions. So while the executive order sets out 3 goals initially, it's the role of the council here to recommend increased ambition or new targets altogether, and also new programs to help achieve those targets to make sure that the council and the state are responding to the urgency and the degree of need to address climate change according to what scientists are telling us. The council can develop and implement programs and activities to support climate mitigation and adaptation. It's important for the council to consider stakeholder input when giving recommendations, which is one of the reasons why there will be a public comment period at the end of the meeting today. Each council meeting will have that as a part of the agenda. In addition, cabinet agencies are engaging with stakeholders of all sorts on an ongoing basis through the implementation of the executive order. In a second, I'll talk about some of the specific directives, specific deliverables that cabinet agencies are developing. Those deliverables will be submitted to the council, and then the council will submit them, reports or other deliverables, to the governor by the due date. So that's another important role of the council. And then, as the secretary mentioned, by October 15th of this year, the council will submit a status update basically on implementation to the governor. And all of this, it's important so that there are clear directives, there's transparency about what's happening, there's a due date, responsible parties, and opportunities for public to weigh in at all stages along the way. Turning to the specific directives, there are specific directives for 4 departments. With the Department of Environmental Quality, the executive order directs that it develop a clean energy plan to encourage increased use of clean energy technologies in both public and private sectors, and that plan is due to the governor by October 1st of this year. DEQ actually has already developed what's called a comprehensive program to include best practices and guidance to help state agencies achieve some of the goals, building efficiency goals in the executive order. And I believe we may hear more about that today DEQ is also, by March 1st, 2020, going to deliver a climate change risk assessment and resiliency plan. So while some of the directives address mitigation, this is one that addresses resilience or climate adaptation. And then the Executive Board directs the department to develop a greenhouse gas inventory, which Secretary Regan already mentioned, has been finalized recently, and you'll see that this is on your agenda today to learn more about what the greenhouse gas inventory shows us. To the Department of Transportation, the executive order directs that it develop a North Carolina zero emission vehicle plan and deliver that to the governor by October 1st. The Department of Commerce has a general directive to develop workforce assessments for the transition to clean energy and clean transportation. So our power sector is moving away from fossil toward cleaner energy. That has workforce implications. We should have a sense of what those are so that we are able to train our workforce for this transitioning economy. And a similar story with the transportation sector. The Department of Administration is developing a zero-emission vehicle plan for the state motor fleet. The executive order directs all cabinet agencies to use zero-emission vehicles whenever feasible. This plan by the Department of Administration will essentially define what is feasible, which kind of business trips can feasibly be made using electric vehicle technology available today, and will address other kind of practical issues that need to be sorted out in order for the state itself to use more zero-emission vehicles. Finally, the executive order has a number of general directives that apply basically to all cabinet agencies. All cabinet agencies are directed to evaluate the impacts of climate change on their agency programs and their operations, to integrate climate change mitigation and adaptation practices into their policies and programs, and to support communities and sectors that are particularly vulnerable to climate change impacts. There's also directive to all cabinet agencies to support clean energy businesses, right? So there are businesses who specialize in clean energy, or businesses and large corporations that value clean energy. The idea here is to recognize the economic development and sort of commerce implications of clean energy, and for us all to work to help support our clean energy economy in North Carolina. The next directive is kind of what I just mentioned about the directive for cabinet agencies to use zero-emission vehicles whenever feasible. And when those aren't feasible, which is going to be the case, to prioritize cost-effective, low-emission alternatives. The last section I'll mention is that there are a number of directives in Section 8 which go to state building efficiency. And so essentially the executive order takes a number of steps in this area. It directs each cabinet agency to establish an energy manager, to identify one. That's already happened. To develop an energy management plan, and to report annually on utility consumption. That way there's sort of transparency, and sort of having that kind of information is a key first step to being able to understand where opportunities are and to measure progress along the way. So I will leave it there. There are more provisions in the executive order, so if you haven't had a chance to look at it, it's a couple pages long. I encourage you to do so. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy, for that comprehensive overview. Next, we'll have Ms. Sushma Mazemore, and she will give an overview of the council's operating procedure.
As Jeremy said, the council has specific responsibilities and roles that's been defined in executive order. Our job is to take those directives and put it into a day-to-day activities list. On behalf of Secretary Regan, I have been coordinating with Jeremy and the rest of the designees to develop a strategy and a plan for achieving the milestones that are outlined in the executive order. As mentioned, the folks sitting here are the primary contacts for their agencies, but accompanying them are their program level staff that you don't see, that are behind the scenes. And behind them are project level folks, technical folks, administrative folks that are supporting this execution of the executive order. So we are just the voice, but we're also planners and doers. We feel like we're just getting started. There's a lot to do. And as we tackle through some of the questions that are coming to surface as to how to best achieve the goals in a timely manner and deliver work products that are meaningful and action-oriented that the governor is expecting, we're going to have to dig through and roll up our sleeves, and we're getting to that point now. In the process of getting to our endpoints, we are constantly doing communications with the public. DEQ has established a web portal, and the link is provided here. And when you get to that portal, you'll see a variety of menu options. There is a section for Executive Order 80, and when you get into that, there's a portion where the specific directives and the general directives have boxes. And when you click on each one of them, for us, let's say the Clean Energy Plan, you'll get to what the department is doing related to the execution of developing that plan. In our case, you'll be able to see where we are, what our process looks like, and how the public can get engaged, what our timeline looks like, and so on. So I encourage you all to take a look at this website because it gives you the closest preview of where each departments are. You can also sign up through an email that Sharon has set up, and all the inquiries will come in, and we'll disseminate it through our designees on any specific questions. And then on the web portal, there's the designees' contact information. So if you have a specific need or interest or question for Commerce or DOT or administration, I'd encourage you all to use the contact list to get in touch with those designees. And then finally, this is our timetable of coordinating our council meetings. We did our first one in Raleigh. This is our second one in Elizabeth City. Because of timing, we're thinking of doing our third one 2 months from now in April in Raleigh. And then we will come back the fourth meeting to western parts of the state, pending availability of a venue. And then our sixth meeting will be in September, a month before when most of the plans are due. The goal here is for the council to review and approve the agency reports, and then we will submit that to the governor. And then our seventh meeting will be around November. That'll be attended by the designees. One quick thing I forgot to mention is that sixth meeting will be attended by the cabinet secretaries, so they can approve the variety of plans that are expected to come out for the EO delivery. So I'm going to stop there, and again, there's a website link to get more information.
At this time, for agenda item number 3, I'd like to introduce for our greenhouse gas inventory report, Andy Bowman and Paula Hemmer of the Department of Environmental Quality.
Thank you, Sharon. Good morning, everyone. This is a particular pleasure for me because I'm sort of an emissions nerd, so I don't usually get to speak to the public. I and Paula Hemmer, we work in the Division of Air Quality in the planning section. We're going to provide a brief overview of the inventory today, starting with the purpose of the inventory. So why do we do inventories? For any kind of air pollutant policy planning, first, one of the main starting points is to develop an inventory. Where are we starting from? So we've done that for the greenhouse gas world in this inventory. Obviously, as part of that planning, we're talking about executive order and the target that we're trying to meet for 2025, so this gives us a starting point for that. The inventory that we've developed, it's a total comprehensive inventory. It covers the entire state. It's a state-level inventory. It covers all sectors. The inventory facilitates identifying the key sectors, where are most of our emissions coming from, as well similarly, what sectors are associated with the greatest potential for emission reductions. And the inventory covers the 6 main pollutants. Carbon dioxide is a common one everyone's familiar with, I think. This slide kind of presents an overview of the 2 main products that we've developed related to the inventory that are on our website. The item to the left is a fact sheet that kind of summarizes our gross emissions in 2017 in the state. What this shows is 2 sectors, the electricity and transportation sectors account for about 2/3 of our emissions in 2017. These are gross emissions. I need to point out there's a distinction to be made between gross emissions and net emissions. Gross emissions are everything that gets put out into the atmosphere. Net emissions are what actually gets sequestered by our vegetation in our state. So net emissions is really what we're most interested in terms of targets and things like that. So in 2017, we emitted as a state about 150 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions. About 25% of those were actually sequestered via our forest and other lands in our state. So we have a pretty big resource for sequestering our emissions. Looking historically, the trends, most of the main sectors have had pretty significant decreases since 2005. And overall, our statewide net greenhouse gas reduction was about 24% between 2005 and 2017. The item on the right is the cover of our report that's available online. A lot more details, a lot more numbers than I'm going to provide today, as well as documentation of our methodologies. So this provides a little bit more detail on the sector level emissions for 3 key years, 2005, 2017, and 2025. Again, showing electricity and transportation being the main sectors. Both of those sectors have had fairly significant decreases, and we're projecting those to continue in the future. One thing to point out is nationally, transportation just recently, I think, overcame the electricity sector to be the biggest sector. We don't anticipate that for our state until the early 2020s. This line here shows the gross emissions, and then the net emissions are on this. The carbon sinks are on the line below that, about 34 million metric tons, again a significant amount in 2017. And net emissions, the bottom line showing 24% reduction from 2005 to 2017. With the current policies on the books, federal in nature, we come out to about a 31% reduction that we're projecting from 2005 to 2025. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Paula Hemmer. She's the... Are you going to do the slide? No. Okay. I will take this slide. So this shows kind of nationally where we rank relative to other states. Total energy production, 29th. Total net electricity generation, actually we're pretty high there, 6th. I think we're about 9th or 10th in population, if I'm not mistaken. So, our total carbon dioxide emissions are 14th. Energy consumption per capita is 38th, so we're doing pretty well there, as well as energy expenditures per capita. And our retail price of electricity in the residential sector as of January 2018 is 42nd. So again, we're doing pretty well on a lot of these metrics. Now I will turn this over to my colleague Paula Hemmer, who's also in the planning section at DAQ.
I'm going to speak a little bit more about North Carolina's electricity generation sector. And this slide gives you a picture of how our generation has changed dramatically in the past few years. In 2005, we were a predominantly coal state at 61% of our generation from coal, and a mere 3% of natural gas, 31% of nuclear, and about 4% of hydro and 1% of biomass. So that's within around 2011, we had a large shift in resource use from coal to natural gas, and we retired about 3,000 megawatts of coal between about 2011 and 2014, and we replaced those with highly efficient, cleaner burning natural gas combined cycle units. And that resulted in our coal going from 61% of our fuel use to generate electricity to 27%, and natural gas went from 3 to 30%. So there's a big shift, and carbon dioxide generated from coal is greater emissions than that generated from natural gas, combined with the higher efficiency of the combined cycle plants. In addition to these, the other thing to point out, in 2017, the growth of our renewables went from 4% predominantly hydro to 9% with 5% solar and a little bit of wind, which we all passed on our way here this morning, about 200 megawatts of wind. So that's made a big change in our state. North Carolina traditionally imports around 10% of its electricity every year. And so these are our values for how the CO2e from the electricity has been generated. And this gives you sort of a percent reduction in both GHGs, sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides. The shift from coal to gas plus cleaner burning or emission controls on our coal units have dropped us down to 90% below our 2005 levels of sulfur dioxide. This is a comparison of the U.S. electricity generation system, and we have 71% fossil. That shifted in 2017 to just 62%, so not as big a shift. Nuclear remains constant at around 20%, and the renewables is the big story here, with 7% of renewables predominantly from hydro, and shifting to 16% renewable in 2017, with a large amount of wind coming on predominantly in the Midwest. And these are the reductions, similar reductions in GHGs, sulfur dioxides, and nitrogen oxides. So 23%, 80%, and 60%. So predominantly, the sulfur dioxides had the biggest change, and not as much shift in GHGs for the total U.S., even though they have a lot more renewables because we retired so much of our coal units. This gives the impact of the North Carolina Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard to our state. The first line is the generation from renewables, predominantly solar. The second line is energy efficiency that's been undertaken predominantly in the commercial and residential sector. So we moved from about 5 million megawatts to about 20 million megawatts from RE and EE. So that resulted in avoided emissions of about 7.5 million metric tons. And as before, we said our current footprint is 50 metric tons. So that's a decent chunk of change from our reps bill. And so we saw a 10%, in 2017 we generated 5.7 million, or did not generate 5.7 million metric tons of CO2, which is 10% of our electricity sector. Sorry about that. I knew I had a cheat sheet with me. All right.
Okay, I'll take back the reins briefly. Just a quick slide summarizing the trends historically in the gasoline and diesel vehicle sector. This shows a pretty steady increase. This goes all the way back to 1990. That's actually the starting point for our inventory. That's in our report. So this shows a pretty steady rise both in the U.S. and North Carolina in emissions as well as vehicle miles traveled. That's what VMT is. That's sort of the activity associated with the emissions. Up through about 2007, the Great Recession hit. VMT kind of flattened out. The effects of on the books vehicle efficiency as well as people, I think gasoline prices went pretty high as well when the Great Recession hit. So people were probably trading out some of their vehicles to be more fuel efficient. And then, since the recovery, there's been an increase, a slight increase in emissions, though not nearly the increase that you might expect from the significant rebound in vehicle miles traveled, both nationally and in North Carolina. So my final slide, in terms of material, is this overview of our net greenhouse gas emissions at the state level. This starts with 2005 on the y-axis. You can see, pretty significant decrease out through, the solid line is actual historical years, and then the dotted line is projections. It does, the projections don't show the same rate of decline, but there still is a projected decline in our greenhouse gas emissions out through 2025. The green line that's up above the dotted line, that represents the Paris Climate Accord target, which was 26 to 28% nationally for each country to try to achieve that. So what this would indicate is if our projections are fairly accurate, that we would at least be achieving that target. Obviously, we're looking to go beyond that here with Executive Order 80. And just some contact information. Cassandra King is actually our main contact. She's not here today. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're going to take just a moment before we move on to agenda item number 4 to ask our panel members who are going to be speaking to come up to the stage. We're going to do a little bit of rearranging here, so if you'll bear with us for just 1 minute. And I'll ask our moderator, Mr. Powell, to come up to the podium.
All right, good morning. I'd like to welcome to the stage our panel for our discussion on climate change, impacts, actions, and recommendations. My name is Bill Kroll. I'm the director of the Albemarle-Pamlico National Estuary Partnership. And we have a panel of folks here, 4 individuals from Eastern North Carolina. I want to take a brief moment to introduce each of you, if you just wave of who you are. Each of them will make a brief introduction, presentation, and in that presentation they'll be addressing the first 2 questions that are on your agenda in some means, and then we'll come back with questions related to the other questions, and then it'll be, if we have time, there'll be an opportunity for folks from the audience to ask questions as well as from the panel. So let's get started. First I introduce Dr. Brian Booten. Brian serves as the director of the Albemarle-Pamlico Sounds Program for the North Carolina chapter of the Nature Conservancy. Prior to his current position, Brian worked as director of conservation programs for the Delaware chapter of Nature Conservancy. He has North Carolina experience, and he was one of the authors of the North Carolina Coastal Habitats Protection Plan. He has a PhD in marine science biology from University of Delaware and a BS in marine biology from UNC Wilmington. And he also serves as the co-chair of the Albemarle-Pamlico National Estuary Partnership's Science and Technical Advisory Committee. Tancred Miller is the Coastal and Ocean Policy Manager for the North Carolina Department Division of Coastal Management within the Department of Environmental Quality. He is the division's lead on sea level rise and coastal resilience efforts, and he is a graduate of Duke University with a Master's in Environmental Management. Daniel Brennan serves as the Water and Flood Control Coordinator for Hyde County Soil and Water Conservation District, where he collaborates with and advocates for various drainage entities and partnerships that play a vital role in protecting the eastward property of the county. He is also a native of Hyde County and a graduate of East Carolina. Holly White is the principal planner for the town of Nags Head Planning Department, where she focuses on long-range planning and grant writing, special project management, environmental issues within floodplain management, and resilience planning within the town. Prior to becoming a planner with Nags Head, she was employed by Currituck County Planning Department as a senior planner and the town of Kitty Hawk as an environmental planner. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Urban and Regional Planning with a focus on coastal planning and a minor in geology from ECU as well. She also serves as the vice chair for the Albemarle-Pamlico National Estuary Partnerships Leadership Council. So welcome this morning. So we'll start with Dr. Booten with your presentation. I apparently have control of your slides, so if you
I'll let you know. Well, I first wanted to start out by thanking Governor Cooper, Secretary Regan, and the members of the North Carolina Climate Change Interagency Council for your leadership on a really important issue for our coast. Climate change does have the potential to have significant impacts to us here in coastal North Carolina, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those impacts, but also some of the solutions that we have available at our fingertips. So next slide, please. When we think about coastal North Carolina and climate change, our thoughts often go to things like extreme weather events, and for good reason. Since 1980, we've had some of the most numerous billion-dollar weather-related disasters in the country. In fact, only really Texas was beyond us in that regard. And over the last several years, we've had some doozies out here. In 2016, we had Hurricane Matthew come through, which was a storm of epic proportion for us in coastal North Carolina. 14 inches of rain fell in some places, and several $1 billion of damage occurred. And not really, but 2 years later, did we have the 1-2 punch of Hurricane Florence and then Hurricane Michael. And for us here in northeastern North Carolina, who did not feel the extreme effects of Hurricane Florence, Hurricane Michael came in with a pretty big punch for us. The storm surge felt in Nags Head was really only a few inches less than what we got with Hurricane Irene. So these type of events are really impactful to our communities, but it's not these events that really are the only thing that we have to worry about with climate change in eastern North Carolina. Next slide, please. A lot of what our risk comes from here, it has to do with either too much or too little water. So water is really the theme that we have to kind of consider for impact here in eastern North Carolina. Our rainfall is changing, and over the past several decades, the amount of rainfall that we're getting in a very concentrated amount of time is increasing. So we're seeing a high number of 2-inch plus type rainfall events, and at the same time, we're also seeing these interannual droughts beginning to occur more frequently as well. So we're having these compact big rainfalls and then stretches of dry and then compact big rainfalls where we used to have a bit more of a normal half-inch rain event. We just don't see that anymore. So with those big rainfalls comes things like risk of localized flooding. With those droughts comes things like risk of catastrophic wildfire. I'll get into both of those in a minute. And what's underpinning a lot of our risk out here as well is sea level rise. Northeastern North Carolina in particular is very vulnerable to sea level rise. Much of this area that we're sitting in is really within just a few meters of sea level. So any sort of rise in our baseline elevation of our sea level is going to have some significant impacts. And you hear it all the time in the news about sunny day flooding. That's really a function of our sea level being higher. Next slide, please. So eastern North Carolina is really reliant upon 3 big industries. So that's our agricultural industry, our tourism industry, and our fisheries economy. And each of these is feeling the effects of climate change right now. Our transportation infrastructure is being impacted more frequently from some of these flooding events. You're seeing washouts, you're seeing folks being stranded in certain places because they can't get out during these high water events. Our fisheries, this past year we just had a fisheries declaration because of Hurricane Florence. That fisheries disaster declaration means really a lot of our fishermen couldn't fish and weren't able to make a living. And so that's a huge potential impact on something that's culturally and economically really important for North Carolina. We're seeing places like historic downtown Manio is getting flooded on a sunny day just because the wind is in the right direction, the water levels are higher. That's impacting the ability of those businesses downtown to be able to make their living, make their money, and contribute to the economy. And also, when we think about places like in Hyde County, and I'm sure Daniel will speak to this a little bit later, but I mean, saltwater intrusion beginning to impact our agricultural communities. And we can't really speak about eastern North Carolina without also mentioning our military. And our military installations are also seeing the effects of climate change. In 2011, with the Paynes Bay wildfire that happened out here, for example, the U.S. Air Force had to wait almost 4 months to be able to begin training their pilots again. So these are all big impacts to us here in eastern North Carolina. But luckily, it's not all bad news. When we think about climate change, oftentimes people put it into the doom and gloom situation, but there are different solutions that we have at our fingertips that we're able to address some of these effects. When we think about natural climate solutions, that's one of the tools in our toolbox that we're able to leverage. Nature is a pretty powerful mitigation strategy for climate impacts. And when we think about how nature can be used, it can be used in a number of different ways. One is on the adaptation side of things, and what adaptation means is being able to use the power of natural systems to absorb floodwaters, for example, or mitigate wave energy that's meeting our shorelines. Things like oyster reefs and wetlands help in that regard. In terms of actually offsetting our carbon footprint, we just heard a little bit about how our natural systems are already doing that. And there's other natural systems, for example, like our peatland precocins. They only represent about 3% of the world's Earth surface, but they actually sequester about 2 times all of the forest biomass in the world. So these type of unique natural systems has the potential to really offset a lot of our emissions here in North Carolina. And finally, we want to make sure that we're managing our natural systems so that we can actually leverage those powers, whether it be the ability to mitigate flood risk or the ability to offset our carbon emissions. So a lot of these tools, really, as I mentioned earlier, are already set, and they're something that we can begin to use now. On the policy side, we have the National Flood Insurance Program. With the National Flood Insurance Program, if communities participate in the community rating system, they're able to lower their cost of flood insurance by doing certain things that get them points. And those points get them ranked, and that ranking helps to grade them and dictate how much of a percentage discount they can get on flood insurance. Open space protection is one of the highest point getters for that program. So as they're able to protect and restore naturally functioning floodplains, that helps to both impact their bottom line and how much they pay for flood insurance, but also protects them from flood events in the future. Things like some of our work with Currituck County, where Currituck County is a great example, and it's just a couple of counties over here. They're looking at their land use plan, the policies within their land use plan, to begin to look at different potential mechanisms like conservation area overlays to limit development in highly risky areas, but also to encourage higher density development in areas that are not as risky to climate impacts. We also have market mechanisms at our disposal. Although we don't have a regulatory carbon market right now, there is a voluntary carbon market which can be harnessed. The Nature Conservancy has worked with the American Carbon Registry to create what is called a carbon offset methodology for precocin restoration. So landowners and even the state could use this to be able to restore their precocin habitat. And once you restore that hydrology, you are able to account for the amount of carbon offsets that are generated through that restoration and be able to market those offsets on the voluntary carbon market to generate income. Finally, one of the great things about this state is we have a lot of expertise here. These local communities are really in need of some help from the state to be able to understand what their risks are, to also then begin to not just look at those risks, but to actually provide some solutions. What can we do? And there's a good partnership that's been developing over many years with the Division of Coastal Management, the Division of Emergency Management, and others that have the tools at their disposal to show communities where their risk lies and what kind of actions they can take to mitigate those risks. And nature is a big part of that. So with that, I thank you all and appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about natural solutions today.
Thanks, Brian. So next is Tinker Miller, Division of Coastal Management.
Good morning. Thank you all for allowing the division to address you this morning. We're very excited to be a part of the whole executive order and what that means for coastal North Carolina. We are based in Morehead City. It's where our headquarters is. It's where I work out of. We also have offices here in Elizabeth City, and we have offices in Little Washington and Wilmington. And our jurisdiction for planning and regulatory is the 20 coastal counties, 20 Canada counties, and the Coastal Area Management Act. So we really delve into what's happening on the coast, what are the impacts, not just on the oceanfront, which is where everybody tends to spend a lot of their time and attention. But what happens on the rest of the inland portions of North Carolina's coastal counties? So what are we seeing? And you'll hear some of the same themes that Brian just went over. Obviously, storminess is one of the big ones. You know, we're seeing more frequent major hurricanes than we've seen in the past. And these things, they appear to be spinning up faster than they have in the past. They go very quickly from low intensity to high intensity, very, very quickly. But then their forward speed, at least in the last couple of years, has been very slow. And that forward speed then gives you tremendous amounts of total rainfall. And then that rainfall leads to record-setting flooding, tremendous loss of property, of productivity, of farmland, crops, and so forth, and huge financial and personal burdens. Along with storminess, there is again erosion. Erosion is a factor of many different resulting factors, including sediment supply, including wave action, storms, but also sea level rise. Sea level rise underneath the other factors exacerbates the amount of erosion we see, and this is on the ocean front and on the estuarine side. On the ocean front, we've had over the last couple of decades, we've had entire roads disappear to erosion and sea level rise. We've had houses, we've had infrastructure go underwater. On the estuarine side, we have tremendous marsh erosion and estuarine shoreline erosion, and we're working actively with partners like the Conservancy and others to find, what are some of the best ways to address the erosion on the estuarine side and the oceanfront side, using natural solutions, so using things like beach nourishment, which is sort of a natural way of putting some protection for the oceanfront infrastructure, Barrier Island infrastructure. And then on the estuarine side, using things like Brian mentioned, estuarine living shorelines and oyster reefs, doing some restoration work and some protection, and finding ways to allow those ecosystems to persist and thrive in the face of erosion and in the face of climate change. We're also seeing ghost forests. Some of you that live on the coast would have seen huge areas. If you go down to Wilmington or other parts of down east, you see entire expanses, acres and acres of forests that are dead. They're just dead trees that are standing in rising waters. But we see barrier islands that are thinning, and we have to consider: do we have a role in what's happening with the natural rollover process of barrier islands? What do we do that might be either helping or hindering the ability of those islands to maintain their elevation and their width? We're also seeing increased local government interest in resilience, and we're seeing folks like Holly White, who's taking a very strong interest in what can we do to help our communities, help our residents, our citizens be more resilient. How can we protect our investments in infrastructure? And I'll let her speak to that, but we're seeing this not just from the Outer Banks, but also from the Inner Banks communities. We've done a lot of work I'll talk about trying to help local government on that front. We're also seeing increased stakeholder interest, and this is from the NGOs, from the academics, from citizens, property owners, or prospective property owners calling up to ask us about sea level rise and climate change, and where should they invest or not invest, and where should they live or not live. And that's something that's, I think, becoming more and more in the forefront of people's minds as they think about their long-term investments. So what are we doing? I'll just give some highlights of the things that DCN has been doing and is doing on climate change. One is providing technical and financial assistance to communities, and this is direct assistance in the form of helping communities to assess their vulnerabilities, help them understand what their exposure is, where are the critical assets that need protection and that are vulnerable to whether it be storm surge or sea level rise or erosion, and what types of things can you do engaging your residents? What types of things can you do to protect yourself and become more resilient to these types of hazards? And where can you find additional resources, whether it be financial resources or technical resources, expertise, guidance, planning guidance? Where can you find those types of things either within the state or nationally, that can help you understand where you are and where you want, how to get where you want to be. We have we've run a process with local governments. We did 6 pilots, I guess, call them pilot studies with 6 local governments on the coast, and we were able to provide some funding to these local governments to then take the next step in terms of designing either what types of structures can be used for erosion control, what types of engineering studies. We gave some very small grants, $25,000 and less, to some of these communities to start doing some of this initial planning and design. We've also given through our land use planning program a fair amount of money for our budget, at least. We've given about $375,000 over the last 3 years, which to us is significant, but to a local government that's considering infrastructure projects, it's really not a whole lot. So 375 over 3 years. This is all federal money that we've been able to allocate to local governments over that time. We've created a web portal that was just released. Christian Cameron here is as our new coastal resilience specialist, and we hope to be able to keep him for a while. He's doing some very good work for us. But this web portal is designed to help local government staff to find those resources, find those tools, to find examples of what other communities in North Carolina are doing, and help them understand how to move forward. We're doing work on providing data and research and regulatory reform. We've done 2 sea level rise assessment reports for the coast, 2010 and 2015. We have another one that will be coming out in 2020. We're working as hard as we can to streamline permitting for some of these green infrastructure or natural nature-based infrastructure features. So living shorelines permitting, trying to get that to where it's a lot easier to permit those projects. We're doing work with our federal partners trying to streamline federal permitting on beach nourishment projects and dredging projects. We're also sponsoring research and participating in research on erosion control, on restoration, and other areas. We're also focusing on networking and collaboration. A couple of examples besides the folks that we collaborate with here are the Southeastern Caribbean Community of Practice. It's climate community of practice with folks from Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina. We try to share best practices on climate adaptation. I guess I could stop there, Bill, and save the rest for.
Thanks, Taker. Daniel, I'll have your presentation up here in a second. So next is Daniel Brin with the Solar Water Conservation District in Hyde County.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak before the council and the guests. A lot of what I would have to say kind of echoes at a little more local level what's already been said about climate change generally on the coast. That's most visible as sea level rise, and echoing the same things about increased storm intensity, increased rainfall. We've had some record rainfall locally for the last 3 years. With I believe 2016 was 40% over average. Go to the next slide. I'm born and raised in Hyde County. I always like to talk about Hyde County before I get into my speech. It's the second poorest county in North Carolina, the second least populous, and one of my favorite facts about the county is the highest natural elevation in Hyde County is 26 feet, and that's a sand dune on Ocracoke Island. So very low, very flat elevations, often measured in miles per foot rather than gradient. There's so little topography, and almost 85% of the county's in the 100-year floodplain. So water is becoming a bigger issue, but it always has been an issue in Hyde County, and it's certainly being exacerbated by sea level rise. That's something you may in your travels and your circles talk with people who might question the validity of climate change. I don't think there's anybody here, but anywhere in Hyde County, you can get anybody to agree that sea level rise is a occurring phenomenon. I believe you'd be hard pressed to find someone who would argue with you. So, a lot of the issues that we're facing have already been echoed. Go to the next slide. Residential flooding from increased storm events. That sunny day flooding is something that occurs very regularly. It doesn't have to be any type of storm event. It can be a wind tide. The water's already elevated. We've had a decent amount of rainfall, and you get any wind coming out of the east, and you may see water coming up on the edge of the roads in places throughout the county. Lots of flooding. We in Hyde County weren't hit so hard with Florence. The northern portions of the county were hurt pretty bad by Matthew. Agricultural community was hurt by Matthew, which is our biggest industry, along with tourism on Ocracoke Island and commercial fishing. We're kind of a microcosm of what Dr. Bryan was talking about earlier with our industries. And so, the residential flooding, we're seeing a migration of communities towards higher elevations. I say that, relatively speaking, higher elevations, where possible. Our major communities on the mainland, you see, are moving towards Lake Ridge properties that are, maybe 4 feet above sea level versus 2 feet above sea level in the traditional coastal villages. And as we've talked about, has already been touched on before, kind of from a regional perspective, saltwater intrusion is having a huge impact in Hyde County. Thousands of acres of agricultural land have been lost. I believe agricultural production for Hyde County capped out almost 110,000 acres in the mid-'80s, and now I believe there's 84,000 acres of cropland in Hyde County. So there's been a loss of cropland. There's some great programs that took some of that cropland that probably wasn't that was marginal. The CREP program, some of the easement programs through the Department of Agriculture and through USDA and RCS. But there's still, thousands of acres that are within that 84,000 acre number that I've cited that are affected yearly from saltwater intrusion. And then we have, you can see those ghost forests, on the Pamlico, on the coastline, the Pamlico Sound, and on the northern part of the county where the Alligator Pungo River cut of the Intercoastal Waterway is very readily visible there. Going up to the old Alligator, the Little Alligator River, Old Alligator River. So that's something that we're definitely seeing. There's certainly a consensus there that this is a real issue that's happening, and that we have to be working towards addressing, planning for, becoming more resilient where it's feasible, and planning for where it's not. Okay, so as far as adaptation goes, adaptation isn't something that has just started. It's adaptation to these kind of increasing water levels and conditions that's taken place over a long period of time in Hyde County. A lot of you may be familiar with the dike around Swan Quarter. That was completed in 2010. Protects 11,000 acres of property there. It was funded through the U.S. Department of Agriculture and USDA and the NCDA. Also helped a lot with that. That's been a very successful project. It's, like I said, 11,000 acres. There was an original investment of about $13 million to get that project done, which seems like a lot of money, but there's $62 million in property value within that dike, and just the crop receipts alone from the farmland within that area are about $6 million annually. So if you think that kind of investment was made, and since its completion, at least 3 different times, it's been successful at protecting that area. So, you know, to me, it's a worthwhile investment. And it's something that's been, has been emulated elsewhere within the county, several drainage districts and service districts for watershed improvements. And it's a continuing effort that we're working towards. And then if you see the map there, that'll show the current drainage districts within the county. There's about 70,000 acres currently within drainage districts that are very successful at kind of protecting property from the events that we're seeing become more commonplace. But that's kind of my spiel. And appreciate the opportunity to speak with y'all about that. Oh, before I quit, also we're talking about partnerships. I wanted to thank partners that the county's been working with in the past couple of years. One of them being Division of Coastal Management. They've been a great partner to us and looking towards becoming more resilient. And one of those small planning grants that we just mentioned was for Hyde County, and thank them. And Sea Grant is another partner. But we appreciate the collaboration with everybody and the opportunity.
Thanks, Dana. So, last but not least, Holly White, next.
Thank you, Bill, and thank the council for the opportunity to share with you all today about what we're experiencing in Nags Head. I was also going to add to Bill's introduction that I'm actually a resident of Elizabeth City and a native of Bertie County. So I'm going to share a little bit, I think, too, from my perspective as a resident, a lifelong resident of Eastern North Carolina. I believe that vulnerability and adaptation really aren't new. Kind of Daniel alluded to Eastern North Carolina or the Outer Banks, and that because of that, it's made us stronger. In order to survive and thrive, we've had to learn how to adapt because we're continually vulnerable to coastal hazards like flooding. I think most of the time that people often think of sea level rise in terms of coastal issues with water inundating over top of land. In the town of Nags Head, we have been seeing and observing and documenting increased rainfall events. Dr. Ron indicated occurring at greater frequencies, and they can be associated with tropical storms, hurricanes, or just extended weather rainfall patterns. And I think most notably Hurricane Matthew in 2016, as well as a weather pattern in 2017. And those events created around 3.5 feet of flooding. So that event, coupled with a higher than normal groundwater table that's extended for longer periods of time, is creating extensive flooding within the town. And I also want to add here that I think that those weather patterns and frequencies, the high groundwater tables, are also contributing to flooding that's observable in Currituck County, Elizabeth City, Chowan County, and Bertie County. I am aware that all of those organizations are working with partners, state agency or nonprofit, to work on resiliency related or flooding related projects to tackle that issue. So in addition to those flooding issues on the coast, the higher intensity storms are battering our dune systems and our estuary shorelines. We consider those as our natural protection mechanisms or soft infrastructure, and they protect the infrastructure, the homes, and the property that are located behind them. This series of events, both from the storm surge and from the increased flooding, creates a domino effect. And I'm going to kind of read through a scenario briefly for you. These were outcomes that were described as part of a community involvement process in partnership with North Carolina Sea Grant. So through this flooding and storm surge, our stormwater systems are inundated and unable to manage the quantity of rainfall that they're designed for. Our state and local roads are flooded. They prevent locals from the day-to-day activities they need to attend to, as well as visitors from accessing local businesses or other destinations. Businesses flood, and at a minimum, their parking areas flood, making it unable for people to visit the businesses. Yards and driveways flood, sometimes the homes, where water sits for extended periods of time over our septic systems. 85% of the town, Nags Head, is on septic systems, and many communities in the Northeast are served by septic systems. The septic systems are impaired and unable to function properly, and the town is concerned about the impacts to the water quality. When water quality is impacted, it affects the recreational value in the town and poses a health risk to those who enter it. And these outcomes may seem extreme or dramatic, but these were actually responses that were noted by citizens in the town of Nags Head during the public involvement process, our VCAP study with North Carolina Sea Grant. And further, what was interesting was that citizens, in almost all the scenarios developed within the community, when we asked them what they believed were the consequences of not taking action, it resulted in a statement similar to the following: that there could be a loss of property values, a loss of tax base, a loss of services, increased taxes, inability to pay for public actions needed to address the issues, and ultimately quality of life decline. All of that information and community input was taken into account. It was documented in our VCAPS report and then carried over as policy and action steps into our comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2017. The town is committed to and is actively working to invest in adaptation actions, both in stormwater and our septic area, as well as land use planning. I'm going to stop for now there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. Thanks, all the panel. So our next question was about how the state prepares or responds to these impacts. But we've had a number of impacts mentioned here. There's recurrent flooding, inundation, sea level rise, salt intrusion, septic tank. There's a whole universe of issues associated with climate change. So what I'm going to ask is if you could maybe give me your top 3 of things that you think the state, maybe under Executive 80, should focus in on their risk assessment. So we'll start with Brian.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, for us, I think the sea level rise component is really important because it impacts so many varied communities, from immediate coastal to all the way back here in Elizabeth City. I think the intensity of rainfall is extremely concerning right now, just because of a lot of the reasons that everybody here has mentioned. That living with water is something that's a reality for us, not just because the water's here, but because there's way more water here than there was just a decade ago. And so figuring out how we can keep our communities thriving in the new reality is going to be extremely important, because this is a culturally important area and an economically important area for the state. And finally, I think looking at a realistic planning horizon on what the impacts potentially could be within a time frame that we think that we can address these issues, I think is going to be extremely important, because there's a healthy balance between looking out 150 years from now and keeping our eyes only at 5 to 10 years. I think we need to have a long enough planning horizon to where the investments that the state makes are durable and enduring. And so I think those would be the 3 that I'd say.
Daniel.
I would echo a lot of the same points. Obviously, sea level rise component of climate change is what's most immediate and most visible, and at least amongst our communities and all the coastal communities will get the most attention and get the most people on board and behind any actions that are recommended from this process. So having a good focus on developing resiliency and planning to address sea level rise you know, in the near future and looking out in the long term, would be just, that'd be the number one priority. Like I said, that's something everybody in my community can stand behind.
Holly?
I would follow on that, and then definitely say the sea level rise component, but a better understanding, background data for rainfall, you know, what is our past history, where are we now, and what does rainfall in the future look like? That's really important in helping municipalities plan for their, not only floodplain management, but stormwater management. I think groundwater is also we're finding is very interrelated into that. And so in order to plan for your stormwater systems and flooding long term, we have to understand how water is moving under the ground as well, how the stormwater and groundwater interface together. So I think better understanding of the groundwater would be helpful in that as well.
Okay.
So I would say we need to be very organized, very deliberate. We need to plan for tomorrow's climate, not yesterday's climate. We need to have new approaches to these challenges, because they're new challenges for us. Sea level rise within the history of the populated coast of North Carolina is a new challenge. We need to be inclusive and transparent. We need to engage all stakeholders. To that effect, we have a couple of workshops coming up in May, North and South, and a coastal summit in June that we're working with our partners to put those on for local governments. And then we need to sustain the effort beyond the lifespan of this executive order. I think we need to think about what happens after the final deliverable is handed off to the government.
Thanks. We're running a little short on time now, but I want to give the council members an opportunity to ask the panel questions if you have any. If you would, for the folks that are watching back, identify yourself before you ask your question. Okay, and so does anyone from the audience have a question? We have opportunity for about two.
Toby Vinson with DEQ. Daniel, just curious, what do you think, or have there been any studies on the impacts that not only what the Swan Quarter levee has done to protect the property and the land and from just water in general? Have you looked at what it's done to impact or save property and usage from saltwater intrusion? Because I look, I'm in dam safety, right. So part of what I've looked at when I look at sort of the overview of Google Earth photos of the levee, if you look at it over time, you're actually seeing some saltwater intrusion impacts of the forest area prior to getting to the levee, but it looks like everything on the inside is still doing fine.
Yeah, there's the original portion of the dike, the original half that was constructed from 1984 to 1995 in 6 phases. And for that section of the dike, the intention, the stated purpose was to prevent saltwater intrusion. And you can, if you say look at Google Earth, you can take a look at that and see a clear separation of that. Just inside of the dike, you've got very productive, some of the most productive farmland in all of North Carolina. You may have areas that are forested or pine plantation that's been planted after a timber harvest. And then just outside of the dike, what you see is ghost forest. I mean, there's the only vegetation only trees that you'll have on the southern side of the dike towards Juniper Bay will be on the toe of the dike, and then beyond that there'll be what used to be forested, where people used to go hunting, deer hunting, right. 40 years ago, and now you can see clear out the Juniper Bay. And then some of the areas within the dike that were being impacted, that agricultural land that had lost productivity, has rebounded as well. So for that, for the purpose of saltwater, the prevention of saltwater intrusion, it's been extremely successful as well.
Have there been any documented impacts, environmental impacts, because of the dike installation? Have there been any documented environmental impacts because it was put in that might have impacted the negatively?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know of anything that's been documented that has shown that there was some ill effect elsewhere because of the installation of the dike.
Any other questions? Okay, panel, you have an opportunity here that a lot of citizens of North Carolina like to have. You have the governor's agencies representatives sitting here before you. What's a key message relative to Executive Order 80 and climate change you'd like to deliver to them? Holly, we'll start with you.
Sure, absolutely. I think the key message is that taking no action would be detrimental not only to Nags Head but to all communities in the Northeast. It inhibits our ability to preserve our culture and way of life, to protect our natural resources, to plan for the future, to build and promote a sustainable economy, and maintain our government function. I think that as communities begin to address the issues associated with climate change and sea level rise, that they will need assistance. Living with water is kind of the theme here, and the water doesn't understand municipal boundaries. I think that continued cooperation and partnership, both from state agencies as well as other municipalities, is going to be critical in moving forward and developing solutions for everyone, and that there are some issues that hopefully can be addressed on a regional level if possible due to economies of scale, such as coordinated and sustainable shoreline management strategies or wastewater planning efforts, as well as planning assistance for local communities who maybe don't have the staff or resources to deal with this issue. Additionally, I think that ongoing dialogue is still needed not only for planning purposes, but as Tinker alluded to, strategic implementation. That as we get into implementation phases of specific actions, there will need to be ongoing dialogue among state and local government, but also with citizens of North Carolina to understand how specific actions will affect communities and their ability to govern. Financial assistance or expert assistance is needed for research and data collection, as I alluded to earlier, the better understanding of groundwater data as well as rainfall data in order to understand the lateral and vertical flow of groundwater. That's important in our stormwater management. Additionally, financial resources will be needed for design and implementation of specific projects, as well as increased cooperation from state agencies that share responsibilities for operation and maintenance of infrastructure, such as drainage and road systems. Within the town of Nags Head, we have 55 miles of drainage system. Of that, a third is located within the North Carolina Department Transportation right-of-way. So we're going to need ongoing coordination in order to develop long-term solutions to our drainage issues, continued partnership to develop those solutions. And lastly, I think assistance for local communities through potentially increasing our regulatory standards as well as implementing those state standards. And that is maybe looking at our separation requirements for groundwater when it comes to between septic and groundwater. That directly affects our water quality, as well as separation distances from the beach and other bodies of water to our septic systems. Maybe we need to look at those standards and how we can re-examine those in a way to protect public health and water quality.
Thanks, Daniel.
Not really anything left on the table. I'd echo all those points coming from a very small county population-wise with a small local government and limited resources. Can't echo enough how much I appreciate the collaboration that we've had so far with Division of Coastal Management and North Carolina Sea Grant on some projects. It's been invaluable to us being, such a small county. But yeah, continued dialogue, continued looking at planning and resource, getting resources from the state where possible to implement projects, whether that be hard infrastructure or some of the more natural projects that have been discussed up here. Just, it's very important, and most of all, I want to echo that we really appreciate what has been done already.
Thanks. Tanger?
So I would say focus on capacity building at the local level, and that I think that's what we're hearing from Holly and Daniel, is how much they appreciate and how much they need additional support. And I think this executive order is a really, really good start in pushing us further along in that direction. The EO specifically directs us to help those governments that want that assistance. So we have already in the state, we have a lot of existing programs within state government that are already geared and staffed, at least to some level, to provide that type of assistance to local governments. And that's really where adaptation and resilience has to happen at the local level. And I'd say as we do that, be very mindful of equities and fairness. There's a lot of justice that's built into, or that needs to be built into the way we move forward with adaptation, move forward with resilience. Be mindful of this is a people problem at the heart, and so how do we make sure that we are doing this fairly to all citizens of North Carolina, not just the ones who ask the lowest.
And Brian?
I would say that climate change is the most pressing challenge that faces all of North Carolina and all North Carolinians, regardless of whether we're on the coast or in the mountains or in the Piedmont. And while the vast majority of the resiliency decisions are going to be made at the local government level, the local governments do require the state to take a leadership role to be able to address these issues at scale. There are various levels of expertise, of financial position within our local governments across the coast. Some of them are much better equipped to deal with new scientific information and being able to interpret things and fund things on their own where others aren't. And I think being able to play a leadership role in bringing partners together and hearing the voices of the local governments and understanding their needs and beginning to connect them with the all-important dollar when it really comes down to it, because that's where the rubber hits the road. A lot of these counties, just like anybody else, they're looking at all the different demands on their funds to be able to keep their communities safe, to keep their communities in a good situation and a good place to live. So it will require investment from all of us to be able to accomplish those goals. And the good thing about us in coastal North Carolina is we have a lot of nature at our disposal to be able to work with and be able to begin living with water. And that provides a cost-effective solution at our fingertips to be able to address some of these concerns.
Thank you. All our panel, thank you. Thank you for sparing your time and your perspectives with our cabinet agencies here in our audience and folks back out there in the internet world. I think we're going to change the arrangement again to have the agencies, but thanks for your
And at this time, we're going to move on to item number 5 on the agenda, which is our agency reports. And I'm going to turn it over to Sushma Mazemore of the Department of Environmental Quality.
Thank you, Sharon. So I'm going to go on first, and then I'll be calling the other agencies to do their reports.
So DEQ's report is about the status of 3 of the specific directives that are outlined in the EO 80. I'm going to start with, based on what we heard from that wonderful panel, where we are in the development of the climate risk assessment and the resiliency plan. And as I mentioned back in December, our approach is very similar to the standard practice that has been defined in various EPA and federal documents related to resiliency planning adaptation. So that approach consists of first doing a scientific assessment of what the climate change impacts are to our state. The climate change impact assessments are done at a global level, and then they're scaled down to a national level. You all may recall that the Global Climate Change Program that is funded by and organized by the U.S. Congress released a report last year, late last year, that provided a lot of good details on what the true climate change impacts are to the country. And they specifically addressed the southeast regions along with other regions in the country. And so we have been talking with the various authors of the report to downscale that understanding to the state level. And our goal is, based on that information and the information that's already available based on that national climate assessment, that we would be able to provide some tools and resources to not only the state agencies, but also to the local governments and the community planners that we plan to do outreach with. So that's the first step in the process. In order to do that, we're talking with university experts and also the authors of the various assessment analysis reports to get us there. Then it's the question of what is vulnerable and in terms of geographic region, in terms of local communities, and we talked a lot about today on coastal vulnerabilities. And then there is a risk assessment. Everybody okay? Okay, I'm sorry about that. Risk assessment. This is basically identifying of those things that are vulnerable. What is at most risk that we want to protect in a given time period, or based on the investments that's available. And that risk assessment may be, certain communities or certain businesses that are most vulnerable, that are targeted and that are identified as part of a resiliency building process. So our general approach is building on that thinking. We are working with stakeholders in developing capacity and building expertise. But we as a department and state agencies, all of us are new to this. Climate change is affecting everyone, but it is changing at such a rapid pace that to keep up with the science and the impacts requires a continuous learning and educational experience. So we are tapping into all the resources that are available throughout our state, particularly by EPA, the various federal agencies, and also the university sector. And so just stay tuned for where we're going with that. And then finally, Tanker talked a little bit about the Division of Coastal Management. Those folks are doing quite a bit of good work in working with the local communities and the local governments in providing that educational and learning opportunities through workshops. And then finally, we hope to come out with a reasonable framework with talking with our council partners about how we're going to approach the development of the plan in the coming weeks and a few months from now. And then I'm going to move on to the second part of DEQ's commitment, and that is the clean energy plan development. We have worked quite a bit with our stakeholder communities and various national partners to present an approach that is getting to a vision of a North Carolina energy future that Governor Cooper has outlined that takes into account the growing availability of cheaper technology trends that are changing the dynamic of how electric power sector is changing across the country and also in the state. And so through this stakeholder process, we will ask various vision building and what our current landscape is in North Carolina. And then through that vision building, asking the stakeholder community how they see our state progressing into the future and what policies and technology solutions and trends are out there that would allow us to take advantage of those opportunities related to clean energy in the state. And then based on those recommendations, we will present to the governor in our clean energy plan what the final policy and programmatic as well as regulatory recommendations are there to get to that vision. Where we are is a process plan has been prepared and is posted on our website, and we have outlined a stakeholder engagement strategy that consists of 4 methods. The first one is called facilitated workshops that we will be doing with the Regulatory Assistance Project and the RMI, which is Rocky Mountain Institute. And together, all 3 of us have designed a 6 series of workshops in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our first one is on Monday. The option to register and request to participate is still open, and I think it closes on Wednesday. There will be other series of workshops that build on the facilitated process. But along with that, we will be also going around the state, as outlined in the table on the right here, to do listening sessions, to communicate to the public what we accomplished in these various workshops, but really getting the message out and getting feedback and input on what the direction, what that vision is for an energy future for our state. There will also be some combined events that we will do. For example, we have a time slot allotted for the State Energy Conference in April that will specifically focus on the clean energy plan process, as well as other parts of the EO80. And then our online input will be taking comments throughout this 4 to 6 month process. So please go to this website. It contains the process plan. And then I'm going to wrap up on where we are on the Utility Savings Initiative. Secretary Regan talked a little bit about our charge to increase the energy efficiency in state buildings to a target of 40% by 2025. We are at, collectively, between state agencies and universities, at a level of 28%. We were 30% last year. We're slightly lower because of addition of new building space added. I'm not going to go into details of all of this, but we collectively, as state agencies, have identified energy managers. Our state energy office team has been working with them one-on-one, and again, with collectively as a group to provide them guidance, roadmaps, some best practices, and opportunities for increasing efficiency in their buildings. I did want to take a minute to sort of just explain why this is so important to state government, and hopefully it can be a role model for local governments and other businesses to realize the savings potential, but also how it helps the environment. So here are the conclusions from the report that Secretary Regan talked about that we presented to the Council as a draft report a couple of weeks ago. One of the conclusions is that as a state, we occupy 135 million square feet of space. We spent over $300 million in utility costs. This is electricity and liquid and gaseous fuels. And that electricity costs represented over half of our utility costs. And since 2003, as I mentioned, we reduced our electricity and fuel consumption by 28%. That's an avoided cost of over $1 billion since 2003. We calculated to get to the 40% level that we would need approximately $200 million in additional investment, but that would, I'm sorry, let me back that up. We would need about $800 million in additional investment to achieve a 40% reduction, but we would save $200 million in energy costs as a result of that. Still, despite all of the efforts that have been put in, we still have opportunities to increase energy efficiency in our buildings and still see savings occur. This last slide shows that the blue line on the graph here shows the increase in building area. So we have, as a state government, since 2003, have added space, laboratory space, office building space, and other space. That has increased. However, if you see the green line underneath it, the actual electricity consumption has decreased. And this parity is showing you the decoupling between our energy usage and our building space. It's a good antidote to show that that we are actually, our efficiency savings are actually showing up in the data, and that electricity usage is changing. And then the table on the right equates all of those energy usage reductions into emission reductions that Paula and Andy talked about. And this is the total emissions avoided from these energy efficiency measures are about 3 million metric tons of CO2. This is about a good-sized coal-fired power plant that operates in our state. And so I'm going to stop there, and I'll call our DOT representatives to update on their report.
Can everybody hear me all right? Yes. Thumbs up to back. Well, for those who weren't here at the beginning, my name is Colin Miller. I'm with the Department of Transportation and their Environmental Policy Unit, and myself, along with my colleague Heather Hildebrand, who's here today, are, I guess, the technical leads for DOT in order to implement Executive Order 80. I can't believe that it's been a month since our inaugural meeting. In December. Since then, we've had Christmas, New Year, and then a federal government shutdown, which at least the DOT sort of put us into a quagmire. But we've still managed to make the initial steps towards supporting the government's mission in addressing climate change and transitioning to a clean energy economy. At DOT, we put together a multidisciplinary team so that we could try and determine what our steps forward were going to be. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. Other states have similar initiatives, so what are they doing? How many zero-emission vehicles do we already have in North Carolina? Hybrids, they don't count. Well, some municipalities register golf carts. Well, that's a bit disingenuous. That's not really what we're looking at here. Chevy has a Volt, that's a plug-in. Prius has a plug-in. Ford, C-Max, that's a plug-in, but they all have gasoline engines, so they don't really count. Hydrogen, we're just talking about electric vehicles, aren't we? Well, they're going to need a place to charge, and how much do those charging installations cost? And what happens if we put them on public property? How do we take money for those? How do people reach them? How do they charge them? Do they need special power supplies? And what happens if the power supply comes from a coal-fired power plant? And the questions keep coming. And so I start today not to be negative or disingenuous or to be trite, but to emphasize that what we're trying to do here is extremely important. Extremely important. It's complex and it's far-reaching. And that everybody here, presenting here today, and the technical staff underneath them, all had daytime jobs before the executive order. And so now we've got this really important task in front of us on top of that. And so that's some of the obstacles that we're dealing with, but we're certainly moving forward. And then when I think this way, I always have my mother's voice in my ear, and the quiet, wise, borderline smug. We don't know what mums are like, but and she says it's worthwhile. Nothing worthwhile ever comes easily or without effort. And so. And so we've onboarded some consultants and we are moving forward. We're getting them to help us list the potential stakeholders, public and private, the people that we need to reach out to. Stakeholders have already been reaching out to us. We've had the City of Charlotte, we've had the City of Raleigh, and several other nonprofits already come to us and asking us, how can we help you? What sort of input can we make? To that end, we've put up the DOT's landing page, which is connected to the DEQ's Climate Council webpage. Right now, it's just a landing page, but we'll be updating it as we make progress forward on the things that we need to be doing, specifically the CEV plan and the other things that we're doing. We've also started formulating a public survey that we want to put out there to try and find out what would make the general public of North Carolina want to buy an electric vehicle, what's stopping them from buying an electric vehicle. We'll be putting that survey out through NCDOT's established public involvement meetings that we already have for our projects and through our social media platforms. Hopefully, with all that in place, a high-level draft plan should be finished by the end of March. With the iterations and the study that we'll have to do from the input that we're getting with everybody and going back and forth and round, we hope to have a draft plan ready for public review by June. We're already out of the gate. Some work that Heather's been working on, designated EV, electric vehicle and alternative fuel corridors and main roads across the state. have already been identified. Some of those are signage ready, so we're hoping that we can actually implement something on the ground that will make people feel a little bit more comfortable about electric vehicle ownership in North Carolina, and that it's really a practical option. As set out in the executive order, we've named our designated agency energy manager. His name is Eric Frazier. He couldn't be with us here today, but I think his boss, Sterling, is here in the audience. Is that true, Sterling? Are you here? No, if he's not, let me be clear about something, that Eric Frazier is the man, and I'm not sure how that gets written into his VIP plan, but it needs to be. I love the way that you put this graphic in, which is the DOT's part of what Sushma was talking about a minute ago, about energy consumption per square foot for NCDOT building facilities. And this is a graph where you want to be negative. We're growing in the negative. We are reducing our energy consumption per square footage. I need to make sure that I get the values right here. Since 2003 to fiscal year 2017-18, our energy reduction alone has resulted in about a $22 million savings. So this is where our efforts to help the environment are also helping us fiscally. On top of that, our water savings incorporated with this effort have saved us over $12 million in the same time frame. Not only NCDOT buildings and the facilities that we work in, we're also looking at NCDOT infrastructure facilities. We've replaced over 10,600 roadway light fixtures from standard to LED fixtures. This is the only roadway lighting project of its type in the nation. The projected savings will help us pay for changing all state-owned lighting across the state to LED, or roadway lighting to LEDs. It's also going to pay for implementing control systems, and that money is also going to cover maintenance and repair of those systems. So, like I said, Eric Frazier's the man. We don't have to go too far back in time to look at what the increased or severe weather events that we have in the state of North Carolina as a result of climate change, what they're doing to our transportation infrastructure. On the left here should be a picture of I-95 going over the Lumber River and not vice versa. It's not just coastal communities and infrastructure that we're worried about. That's Henderson County over there on the right-hand side, Division 14 up in the mountains with rainfall-induced slope failure. So the DOT is extremely worried about its vulnerable assets and how we respond, how we make those assets more resilient. One of the studies that we're doing at the moment in order to assess those risks, and this is a fantastic one, people that like to geek out, I heard a moment ago about geeking out on this type of science, is we're doing hindcasting as opposed to forecasting. We've taken 62 of the most severe tropical storms and hurricanes that have hit North Carolina over the last 160 years, and we've modeled them. And not only did they model those storms, they tweaked them. They tweaked the angles that they came in and the times that they took to come in, and the tide levels, and they've done wave mapping based on that, and surge mapping based on that, so that we can list out what our vulnerable infrastructure elements are, the roads and bridges that we need to look at first, and the communities that we need to assess first. At home, within DOT, we're looking at our own fleet of vehicles. Now, DOT has essentially two fleets: their equipment fleet and their motor fleet. The equipment fleet, the yellow trucks, we might have to push those aside just a little bit for the moment. All of those at the moment are as clean running and as clean burning diesel as we can make them. But the low-hanging fruit for us are our motor fleet vehicles, our division of administration vehicles, and the vehicles that we drive day to day. So we're looking at those 580 odd vehicles across the DOT. We're analyzing the type of trips that they're making and the length of those trips. We're looking at what it's going to take to install charging stations at all DOT facilities. We're going to have to charge them somewhere if we end up buying them. Our Division of Aviation and other divisions within DOT are also looking at use of electronic vehicles, aviation, looking at electric pushback vehicles, and encouraging airports to look at them and if they can implement them. Public transportation has for a while and will continue helping local agencies implement alternative fuel public transit fleets or electric public transit fleets where possible. The ferry division, while not going electric, although I did see a really interesting talk this last January at the Transportation Research Board about Washington State, and they were installing electric ferries, so I'm going to have to catch up with the Division of Ferries. But they've recently installed some really clean burning Tier 3 diesel engines on 5 of their vessels, and so they're also moving forward, doing what they can to cut down the greenhouse gas emission. With that, I'll pass to
Thank you, Colin.
administration.
So, we're gonna next, actually, Commerce is next, George.
So George Sherrill with the Department of Commerce, and Executive Order 80 tasked the Department of Commerce with conducting a clean energy and a clean transportation workforce assessment. The department has asked Dr. John Harden, our Director of the Office of Science, Technology, and Innovation, to lead a team of economists and research persons to undertake this task. And John, I'd like if you could give the audience an update on how we're planning to do that.
Will do, thanks. So the mission of the North Carolina Department of Commerce is to improve the economic well-being and quality of life of all North Carolinians. And climate change is clearly challenging that mission, but it also creates an opportunity within that mission. And one of those opportunities is with respect to the workforce. So as the slides indicate, and I have to say this actually is the short version of the slides. I'm working with some really smart people who bombarded me with a ton of information, and so I boiled it down to this, but it's still a little too long probably. But I'm gonna have to look up here and read it a little bit to you. But our job is to, for both the clean energy sector and the clean transportation sector, figure out, what do we have in terms of the existing talent pool and what are the future workforce demands? That is not as easy as it sounds, because how do you define clean energy and how do you define clean transportation? If you've got a solar installation company, do you count all the jobs in that company, including the accounting technicians and the janitorial staff, or do you count just the people who are actually installing the solar panels? And so you have to make judgments like that. Once we make some of those judgments, then we are going to assess the employer's current and future workforce skills, their skills and what their training needs are. We're going to compile educational program offerings, enrollment trends, and work-based learning opportunities across the state. Then once we have all that information, we're going to identify the gaps between those and areas for improvement. And then we're going to recommend actions to help North Carolinians develop the required skills and education. And so we do have a team of economists at the Department of Commerce in our Labor and Economic Analysis Division. We've got a small subset of them, 4 or 5 people. We've dubbed ourselves the Clean Team, and we're working on clean energy and clean transportation. And we're in the process of getting an environmentally friendly t-shirt that says Clean Team on it. And George, I don't know if you knew that yet, but we're doing that, assuming you approve the finances for that. And so we are going to also undertake a stakeholder process where we are consulting with organizations in the energy and transportation sectors. We're doing that right now, and I'll give you more detail in a minute. We're going to consult with the employers that we identify from that regarding what their workforce needs are and the skills that they need. We're also consulting with private and public education institutions across the state, see what they offer and what they potentially could offer in the future. Throughout the process, we're going to solicit public comments, especially when we develop some draft recommendations, get some public comment on those. Updates are available on the Department of Commerce's website at the current initiatives section. So as far as the update, so far, we're kind of in the initial phase where you do a lot of homework, and this is the foundation of the analysis. Once the analysis takes place, it's pretty quantitative, but the value of that quantitative analysis is very much dependent on the foundation that you build in terms of, are we defining the sectors properly? Are we looking at the right industries? And so that's the phase we're in right now. We're consulting with several North Carolina organizations, including the Sustainable Energy Association, the Clean Energy Technology Center at NC State University, the Energy's Future Initiative, the Research Triangle Clean Tech Cluster, the Governor's Office, DEQ, Department of Transportation, and then once we talk with them, we're going to go out to industry and ask them similar questions. We've also made outreach to federal and state governments, including Washington State, which has done a clean jobs report. Luckily, North Carolina is kind of ahead of the curve on this, and so we are one of the leaders in the nation on this, which is good for us from an analytical perspective, which means we don't have to review 50 reports, we have to review maybe 5 reports from other states. But some of those states have done some good things, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to learn from their experiences and try to move beyond that, and that's what we're doing. And we're also reviewing several national and state level clean energy and transportation reports. So here's our timeline. Right now we're in the kind of the quiet phase, the make sure we have the definitions proper phase. Then once we have those defined, we will start doing data gathering. And the Department of Commerce is lucky that it has access to a lot of resources, good data resources that are standardized across the nation and actually across North America. And so there's something called North American Industry Classification System codes, or NAICS codes, and that allows us to do a very systematic analysis of sectors and industries. There are also standard occupation codes, and so once we know the relevant industries, we'll be able to drill down within that and identify the relevant occupations and do it very quantitatively. So we'll know, are we talking about 1 million jobs here, or are we talking about 100 million jobs? And we won't know until we do the analysis. In fact, we probably won't do a single point estimate. We probably will say, okay, if we take a conservative approach, it could be as low as this, but if we take a more generous approach as far as definitions that we use, the number of jobs could be as large as this. And so it'll give us a range, and that'll allow people to if they want to go with the conservative estimate, they can do that. Or if they want to go with a more generous estimate, they can do that, but we'll know what the range is, and that's a good practice within an analysis like this. We'll draft the assessments between May and June. Sometime between July and August, we'll get public comment. Based on that public comment, we'll make some revisions in September, and then in October, we will submit the final assessment to the governor. So in terms of what Commerce is doing, in addition to this workforce analysis, clearly, as was noted earlier in the session, communities are being impacted by climate change. And we saw this as we were driving down from Raleigh. There was just a lot of water on the side of the roads that typically is not there. And that's just the visible impacts. There are a lot of invisible impacts that will affect buildings and sites for industrial development as well as just residential development. Transportation networks, are necessary to move people between their homes and their jobs, and also the products from producer to consumer. And also, this is affecting the overall quality of life. And so all of those impacts could negatively impact community competitiveness. And if this is happening in North Carolina, but happening not as much in other states, that's going to affect our competitiveness in a relative sense. So our economic development efforts need to focus on that. We don't want to shy away from it, but in fact what we want to do is address it head on, and that's why we're doing this with this council. And so in terms of how we are incorporating these sorts of things into our operations, a big way we're doing it is we are reducing the use of paper operations, most notably through using electronic records. My office runs some grant programs. Almost all of that is done electronically. We have very little paper in that grant process. Another big example would be our Division of Employment Security, which is one of the biggest divisions within the Department of Commerce. It has a cloud-based unemployment benefits application that used to have 30 pages of forms associated with it. Now it is all electronic. And you multiply that times hundreds of thousands of people across the state, that is a lot of trees that we're saving. And so we're working hard on that. We have other practices that we still need to develop and implement. This will take time, but we are working on it, and we'll get there. In terms of zero emission vehicles, we are committed to integrating those into our fleet. The employees, when we can't do that, are encouraged to carpool with others. 3 of us drove down together instead of 1 person per car today. And we are, in terms of lighting, we are using increasingly timed and motion activated lighting, which is a great thing, but it always freaks me out when I go into the bathroom and all of a sudden the light turns on and then it turns off when I leave, but I'll get used to it. We're helping the environment that way. We are also developing a utility management plan for commerce overall, and we again will be adopting and implementing other practices as we move forward.
Thank you, John, for that update. We are followed by, I'm going to leave it up to Mark whether he wants to do it now or later.
Sure.
Now?
Go ahead.
I am Mark Edwards with the Department of Administration, and in looking at the agenda, it is obvious that I am standing between y'all and lunch, and that is not a comfortable position. So I will go quickly as I can through this so that we can go ahead. As we talked about before, the Department of Administration is charged with trying to increase the number of zero-emission vehicles that we have in our motor fleet, so that we can cut down on the amount of emissions from our state motor fleet cars, and trying to find the best way that we can use these vehicles for all of our partner agencies. Doing so, we're going through and we're talking with our stakeholders, and our stakeholders in this case are our fellow state agencies, our other cabinet agencies, our council of state agencies, community colleges, UNC system schools, all of whom get cars from the motor fleet system. So we're going ahead and engaging with them, finding out one, how do they have any particular plans for zero emission vehicles on their own right now, but also looking at the data that we have and that they can provide for us on how they're using their cars, what kind of trips we can identify that could be used with zero emission vehicles, and how do we get those in their hands. One of the tricky things with a lot of the state agencies is, as you know, DOT was talking about earlier, was trying to get charging stations out across the state. To use the zero emission vehicles, you have to be able to charge them. And so we're working with the agencies right now to find out, look at their usage of vehicles and where we can take zero emission vehicles and plug it into their system to best use and try and get some of these other cars off the road and reduce their emissions from that. There we go. We've just kind of a status update. We have begun those discussions with the agencies. We're in the process of trading data with them and getting that data back. We are having one-on-one meetings with them, and we're also trying to show them a little bit more about what type of zero-emission vehicles are available for them to purchase. Our timeline, right now, we're in the middle of that engagement process. We'll be spending the summer going over the data that we acquire from the agencies to come up with a specific plan that will be drafted and submitted to the council by September of this year for consideration. Some of the general directives and how DOA is responding to that. Administration is a little interesting. We're kind of the drip hand of state government. If something doesn't necessarily have a specific home, it usually ends up at Department of Administration. To that, we have a lot of advocacy groups that support various goals and advocacy teams in the state. And those groups are now working with their partners across the state to find out how climate change is affecting those partners, how they're planning for that, whether it be temperature change, rising water. It affects all of these groups differently. So we're going ahead and having conversations with them on how they're planning for climate change and how we can help them do that as well. Also, going further, our purchase and contract division is designing sustainable procurement processes that we can work with, again, all of our other fellow agencies so that we can come up with more sustainable products for them. And our state parking division, which handles all the state parking in the Raleigh area for state employees and state governments, is incorporating new and additional charging stations as we plan decks and parking lots. Obviously, if we have these cars, these zero-emission vehicles, we have to have a place for them to charge. And so we're trying to incorporate that not only in our existing decks and lots, but in all future planning so that we have more options and we can incorporate and support more of those vehicles going forward. And that's another way that we're trying to encourage the use of zero-emission vehicles, not only in our own department, but in all the others as well. With the state building and energy consumption reduction goals, we have a unique role because Department of Administration actually houses the State Construction Office and the Facilities Management Department. Those two divisions are working closely with DEQ, with other departments to try to incorporate better energy efficiency standards in all of our state buildings, not only in the design of new buildings, but in our existing buildings as we're going through the process and upfitting and retrofitting those buildings so that we have more energy conservation in those buildings as well.
We have about 5 minutes, actually 12:15 is our break time. I wanted to take a few minutes and just get your all input on, as you know, there are two specific deliverables thus far in the EO80. One was the inventory report, and then the second is the comprehensive program update report. And I think as a group, we need to discuss if there are any revisions you'd like to make, any changes you'd like to make before our team goes ahead and submits it to the governor. And would like to get your thoughts on it. If it's okay to proceed with submitting it. Okay. Jeremy, you have any thoughts on any guidance on how we do this? This is our first one.
I think this makes sense to see if agencies have any input or changes, edits to the document, and then if not, have the secretary as his designee of the council would submit that to the governor.
Okay. So after this meeting, we'll proceed with that. We'll issue a letter and the report, and it'll be posted on our website, and the folks will be able to have access to it. And it'll be our baseline for determining where we're starting in order to account for the additional measures that will be taken and quantifying the savings after that. Okay, thank you. So with that, Sharon, I'll give it back to you.
So at this time, we'll go ahead and take a lunch break. We'll start back at 1:15. A reminder to sign up for opportunities for public speaking at the registration table. We'll see everyone at 1:15. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Doug Holbrook, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the Department of Public Safety. We have a brief report on where we have begun in terms of complying with Executive Order 80 and also some brief look forward as well. How are we evaluating the impacts of climate change on our programs and operations? The principal two areas where we fit into impacting climate is that we have a very large fleet of vehicles, and we have a whole lot of square footage, 19 million square feet of buildings across the state of North Carolina. That's armories, prisons, juvenile justice facilities, and then just some very peripheral other things, but huge amount of space that requires utility payments. And so we are using to the best of our ability using software dashboards to track all of our utility usage of the various types by facility across the state. And our central engineering office is really sort of the main clearinghouse principally for buildings and our facility utilization. So Paul Brave, who is our energy manager, is the lead person on minding the dashboard and figuring out what we're doing in terms of our use of water and other utilities, water being a big institution for us. How are we integrating climate change mitigation and adaptation into our operations? We've just created our internal working group last month. We've had an organizational meeting, again, with the dual focus of looking at our utility usage and looking at our fleet. I'll talk a little bit more about the fleet in the next context, but again, our central engineering team, which is responsible for any new construction. We're not doing a lot of new construction right now, except in various juvenile justice and the National Guard, but we're also constantly doing repair and renovation and capital improvement projects on our existing facilities, and the compliance with DO80 is definitely one of the checkoff points in any project that we work on, that we can have an impact with any changes or repairs, renovations, et cetera, with any of our large-scale facilities. How are we prioritizing zero-emission vehicles? As I mentioned, we have the largest fleet in state government. We have 2,200 highway patrol vehicles. We have over 2,000 probation officer vehicles. We are the largest single fleet. And a lot of our vehicles have very specific needs, right? Have specific needs in a vehicle that may not be well served by that kind of zero emission vehicle. But we are pursuing, currently we've begun onboarding a lot of new juvenile court counselors who are in the community, who are going around visiting the juvenile delinquents whom they supervise, doing home visits, and we are where it's feasible within the county that there is adequate charging space where we are keeping the cars. We are purchasing, half of our new vehicles are going to be zero emission or reduced emission vehicles. This will be kind of a pilot initiative for us in terms of working with our both our probation and our juvenile court resources. We also are looking at our fleet of maintenance vehicles. We have 55 prisons across the state, and we use a lot of trucks. And a lot of what we need is perhaps one truck and some golf carts to move people around rapidly. And so that would be an area where we are exploring and where we hope to be working closely with DOA as we kind of develop strategies for leveraging better prices, because some of the vehicles that we've looked at are really about double the cost of just buying a truck. So we have to be very mindful. We have a very thin budget. We don't revert much of our money annually for that. So we are, we also have buses and vans with which we move inmates across the state every day. So a lot to evaluate, and that is the part we have done a lot more work thus far on the with our team on the facilities than we're just at the opening stages with our vehicle utilization. How are we supporting, say, building energy consumption and reduction goals? We are trying to work with the larger group on some language in the budget bill to enable us where we are able to generate energy savings, to repurpose those savings where possible, to use it for reinvesting in better energy approaches. We have are working with the guidelines on our design of all of our facilities. As I said, right now most of our new building is going to be related to housing juvenile offenders, because the age of juvenile jurisdiction has changed from 16 to 18. We're expecting about a 60% increase in that population as a result of that. And also the National Guard is doing a huge building program, which is part of the federally funded, but we're definitely, they also have an energy program manager who is helping them in minimizing their utility use. And again, working on analytics of our data that we use. I mentioned the Capturis application we're using for tracking through a dashboard what we're currently spending. We've also noted that the state accounting system doesn't really lend itself well to any purpose for tracking the different kinds of utility purchasing and use of fuel. So we are hoping that also to build into the planning for the state's new financial backbone, which we expect to happen over the next 4 years, that this kind of functionality will be an integral part of that. So these are the main issues that we have dealt with on the in trying to respond to Executive 80, and both in terms of the climate change and also being good stewards of the money that we have, so that we're not digging a deeper hole in our budget annually with these higher costs, and also having the impact of reducing our carbon emissions.
Got it. So, good afternoon. My name is Iris Cooper. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Contracts, Procurement, and Grants at the Department of Health and Human Services. So I'm going to talk about health impacts, which I know nothing about because I'm not a doctor, but I'm representing my agency well, and I will steer you in the right direction. So we looked at how are we actually evaluating the impacts from climate change. And our Division of Public Health is doing several studies looking at potential health impacts on North Carolina related to climate change. And they have prioritized some activities and adaptation activities in several southeast North Carolina counties. They're introducing a heat-related alert system in 5 counties. And we're also looking to implement school programs to reduce health impacts of wildfires, because it's not all about water, as we heard earlier this morning. We are linked through the DEQ page. There is a DHHS link that will give you the direct link back to DPS, and I would encourage you to go research and take a look at the ever-evolving health studies we're doing. In terms of prioritizing zero-emission vehicles, we don't have our own fleet. We use the state fleet, so what the state introduces, we will eventually use. Again, but we're limited, I would say, by the infrastructure of charging stations and where do we actually take this. I think that's going to be a limiting factor, but we're happy to contribute to anything we can do. And then lastly, we do have 14 facilities across the state. There's mental health care, drug treatment facilities that are mostly older buildings, so very difficult to get to a real energy efficient program. We are looking though at the Captures program, which is the gentleman from Public Safety just spoke about, to actually track our energy consumption in our facilities to see how we can impact that. And lastly, what falls in my area is the procurement piece. We're looking at mandating more sustainable products and services and seeing, but this is something we would put out to the vendor community for comment, because I'd be interested to see how they feel about that. Because just because it's sustainable doesn't mean it's cheaper, so I think we need to recognize that. I think that's it.
Thank you, Iris. Next we have Reed from DNCR.
I'm going to ask the same question. Which button do I push? Good afternoon. I'm Reed Wilson. I'm the Chief Deputy Secretary at Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. Our department manages, promotes, enhances all the things that people love about North Carolina, really. We have our arts and cultural traditions through our North Carolina Symphony, our arts councils in all the counties of the state, and our art museum in Raleigh. We've got natural resources like all of our state parks, our zoo, our 3 aquariums in Jeanette's Pier, our science museum in Raleigh, and we have a lot of historical resources, including a number of history museums, including this one, and the one in Raleigh, and about 25 historic sites around the state. So a lot of people say, what does that mean, natural and cultural? So there you go. One of the reasons I mentioned all that is because to us it's fairly obvious in certain ways what the effects of climate change are on our department. Because we have facilities all over the state and they are different types of facilities, some of them are very old, some of them are fairly new, we see the effects of climate change. If you looked at just Hurricane Florence alone, damages to our department totaled more than $7 million. And if you add in recent drops in revenue, because people just aren't going the way at the same numbers they used to before the storm, we're going to, hopefully this will turn around, but we're continuing to have lower visitation than we used to. And I think a lot of it is people in these counties that have been affected by the storm, they don't have the resources they used to or the time to be able to go out and do the things that they can do at our department ordinarily. We're also seeing other, in addition to just the damages from that one particular storm, we see changes on the landscape every day. The whole cycle of plants and flowers blooming, they're just different than they used to be. I can talk to a ranger in almost any park and they will talk about that, how things just are happening at different times of the spring or the fall. Our battleship North Carolina in Wilmington is having sunny day floods in the parking lot and on the road coming in, which makes it really hard for people to come learn about the history of that particular site. And in addition, we're seeing in the parks in particular invasive species that didn't used to be there because the climate is changing. So a lot of this we are seeing on a daily basis around the state. In terms of things we are trying to do to comply with this executive order, which we are eager to do. One of them is, the governor said repeatedly, all of our communities need to rebuild stronger and smarter. Our department has two trust funds that are funded by the legislature. One is the Clean Water Management Trust Fund. The other is the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund. We believe, and the speakers at the earlier panel, I think, were excellent at describing the importance of protecting floodplains and restoring streams and wetlands so that we can regulate floods and try and mitigate their damage in the future. And funding from the Clean Water Management Trust Fund can be used to do things like that, to purchase and preserve a floodplain, to restore a stream that's been damaged, to restore wetlands that have been damaged, and in that way help those natural systems function the way they're supposed to, which would mitigate the damage from future floods, because we're going to have future floods. And on the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund side, a portion of their grants are given out in a competitive process to local governments that apply. And we think there's a great opportunity to both move buildings out of floodplains that keep getting flooded, move those out, preserve those floodplains, and then use this Parks and Recreation Trust Fund to put parks and trails and greenways in those places so that you're both keeping that natural system functioning, but also creating an amenity for the community that they're going to love. I mean, everybody loves a park or a trail or greenway, so if you can turn a place that has been a site of devastation into something that people really enjoy, that's a great thing for that community. So we are hoping that the legislature will put more funding into both of those trust funds in the long session coming up shortly. More internally, even before the executive order, our department had created an environment and energy performance team to try and do everything we can to make our operations more sustainable across all these buildings across the state. And so this is we have someone from every division in our department on this team, and this will be our primary means of making sure that we are complying with this executive order. But we're looking at other issues as well, such as the aquariums have been pushing the entire department to think of ways and to make progress in greatly reducing the use of single-use plastics because of their effect on the ocean and the critters that live in the ocean. In addition, we're trying to reduce waste and increase recycling efforts at our sites across the state. So this team we have formed, I think, is going to help us not only comply with this particular executive order, but do other environmentally sustainable things as well in the coming years. So, like everyone else has said, we're looking at our fleet and trying to figure out which cars or trucks can be switched to zero-emission vehicles. And like others, we have challenges in certain ways. You can't necessarily just change out all the pickup trucks you have in state parks for something else. But we are looking very seriously to figure out for which vehicles can we turn them into zero-emission vehicles for us rather than whatever they are currently. Some of our sites, especially the ones that have a lot of people come, already have electric vehicle charging stations, and more of them want to do that. And we've been able to have some interesting partnerships with utilities who have helped us do that. For instance, at the North Carolina Zoo, actually the whole thing came from the local electric co-op, and I don't think we had to pay a dime, which is a wonderful thing. Public-private partnerships are good, and a number of people today have talked about that. And that's one of the things we think is important, is it's not just our department working on its own, but we need to reach out to our stakeholders and try and figure out creative ways to get more done than we otherwise would on our own. In terms of the buildings, we're not building a lot of new buildings. We may have some in the near future, so obviously we're going to be looking at really green building standards to do that. But we do have a lot of repairs and renovations, and so we're going to be learning from others around the table and stakeholders to figure out the most environmentally responsible way to do those things. So our department is very eager to be a part of this. We're thrilled that the governor is leading on this and leading the whole state on this effort. The stakes are huge, as everyone has heard already today. This is about our future quality of life, our future health, our future economy. So I look forward to our department working with all the others and all of you and people around the state to meet the goals of this executive order so we can have a strong economy and healthy communities all across the state for years and years and years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Reed. Now we'll have Angela from Climate Revenue.
So we've heard from several others today about the impacts of climate control and the storms. So for us in the revenue world, that translates to tax revenue and the tax base. So we're certainly looking at how the storms are affecting current state. We do have recovery methods in place when we have an incident like that, but we'll need to look to the future. When businesses can't operate, if they can't charge and collect sales tax, that does affect the local government and communities because that actually money flows back down to the counties. So we'll certainly be doing more investigation around that. So we have developed a team in the Department of Revenue, and they've come up with several initiatives that we'll be working on to support the executive order. We do collect taxes year-round, believe it or not, but if you ask anybody at the Department of Revenue, we call now tax season. It is January through April, so this is our biggest time for individual income. Some of you who may track the number of days to your favorite holiday, we track the number of days till April 15th. In case you're interested, there are 56. So don't panic yet, but we would appreciate you filing on time, paying if you will, and we're really promoting electronic filing. So if you do go to our website, we've started our marketing campaign around the free file initiatives that we offer from our website at the Department of Revenue. So some of the other things that we are looking at are reviewing some of our operations in the main building. Of course, Department of Administration helps us with our main site, but we have leased offices across the state, 14 of those. So we will work with our property managers to see what we can do and what initiatives they have to improve some of those buildings. We're also developing an awareness program for our employees and also looking at the teleworking policy. This is something that we have not expanded over the years, but feel that if we can encourage our employees to telework, that will help the overall utilities that we use and benefit for the employees. Like other agencies, we're analyzing the use of our vehicles. We have long-term lease vehicles and some from motor fleet. So we'll be looking to see what opportunities we have there. We are in an older building, not as old as some others. It was built in the early 90s. So now as we're starting to replace equipment, anything from lighting to use LED lighting, our power distribution units in our data center, the cooling units, we're doing some renovations on the HVAC, and our IT equipment. So when you add all of that up, it does make a difference in our energy conservation. So we're doing a lot of improvements in the building itself. And lastly, we look at the lights. So if you go in our offices, most of them in the field, they're action trigger lights that come on. We do have on-timers in the building around our core hours so they can turn off in the evenings. Someone comes in, they can certainly manually turn them on. So we're continuing to identify opportunities. It's great working with the council. I've gotten some ideas that we had not even thought about for our agency. So the sharing of ideas has been very helpful, and we look on continuing those efforts going forward.
And now we'll have IT, Nate, do an overview. Sorry.
There we go. I think I know how to use it. Good afternoon. My name is Hank Kaler. I work for the Department of Information Technology. We don't get funded from the state, very little, so we have to be smart in how we use our energy. Now, one thing in IT, what do we use? We use power. We absorb it, a lot of it. So a lot of our thinking now, can we do a better job? So kind of looking forward and backwards at the same time. One, we're evaluating our contracts. We look at our vendors. Can we look at vendors that are doing what we're trying to accomplish here? Can we buy better products, more efficient? I'll give you an example, hard drives. Remember your hard drive at home? 24 hours a day, it's turned on, you turn the computer off, then you can't update, then you have to turn it back on, do the updates. Well, smart IT technology today allows us to have drives that turn off automatically. Sorry. So if you're not using the drive, there's no power being utilized. And that's smart technology. We cut our cost a lot. And that's what we're kind of converging into. And we service all the agencies with IT. So what do we have to do? We impact every agency out there. So we're evaluating our existing contracts, looking for green, working with the contract office as well and contractors. We're looking at clean energy planning. When our desktops, same thing with them. Do they turn off when you're not using them? Right? They turn on when they have to be patched. Those kind of things. How many desktops are out there? You can't even count them. There's just way too many. So we're trying to look at innovation in the industry to find out what's the best practice out there. And we're engaging. We're engaging our employees. We're getting everybody involved. We're doing town halls. We're doing a contest. With the best idea, you get the closest parking spot. Actually, you get the CIO's parking spot. So we're trying to do innovative things with the staff as well. We're also looking at best practices. We're going out to the industry. Look what the industry is doing out there. What are they doing better, cleaner, greener? What are our other agencies, other states? How are they doing it differently? We're engaging with them as partners as well. So we're kind of reaching out to all the different communities to get the best practice. Now for us on the vehicle side of the house, we have very few vehicles. Most of us are introverts. We have 2 data centers, and we have comm centers around. We don't leave the facilities very often. They keep us in our caves. So we're going to follow what DOA and other agencies do for the vehicles. Then one of the initiatives we just finished planning for is, like everybody else, change out the lights. So we can manage them. There are LEDs. They cut the cost. When people aren't around, they turn off. It's like conference rooms. You go by conference rooms today, what do? The lights are on. You kind of put your hand in, turn the lights off. Right? Kind of being conservative. Well, the new tools, they turn them off themselves. Well, it's the same thing with IT. We're instituting software applications that can manage our data facilities and manage them well. The water, the heat, the lights, all those kind of things. There's innovation out there. I don't have to cool the whole data center. I can cool a rack. And then I can take the heat from that rack and put it back in the building, reuse it. These are the kind of things we're looking at, innovation. Kind of exciting. So, what I say to you today, I'd like to leave with you that we are looking at every innovation as possible. We're getting all the IT people in the room, collectively collecting their ideas. We'll be working with our partners in the other agencies. And our intent is to collaborate, learn, and then, of course, dispel all this information to everybody. All right. Thank you for your time.
Slideshow. Good afternoon. I'm Cecil Holt. I'm the DMVA architect for the Department of Military and Veteran Affairs, and somewhat running late here. Our plan at this point will be to, our main focus is the military and assisting veterans. So as a new department, I don't have a lot of history. I've been on board about 5 months, but what I have targeted as a low to no cost will be to focus on 4 of our existing nursing homes for veterans, and we'll be looking into, changing out the T12 bulbs to T8s and more efficient light fixtures, providing funding. And we also have 3 cemeteries, veteran cemeteries throughout the state, and we'll be looking into power company LED solar light pole leasing programs. We're also in the process, and that's primarily what my focus is right now, we're in the final stages of design of 2 120-bed nursing homes, and we're trying to be as efficient. In a nursing home, you gotta stay heated and cooled properly, but we're trying to be conscious of as much energy efficiency as we can. We'll also be looking at the older facilities and trying to, in any replacement activities, go to more efficient systems. On the military side, we'll be reaching out to the installations in the state and reporting back to the program for the climate change on what the military installations are doing as well. Thank you.
So I wanted to just take a minute, and I think I personally feel pretty humbled to be working with you all. I think when we all met in December, we had a little bit of feeling that this is a big endeavor in front of us. I can speak for myself. I feel a little more comfortable being surrounded by our council partners, and it's just amazing how so many things have trickled down to the staff level. I think we're learning off of each other. This has been a good venue to share, but I'd also like to encourage us to continue our discussions and dialogues together so that we can learn off of each other, not reinvent the wheel, because time and energy is so precious to us right now. So don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us to coordinate, to plan, to share ideas, and so that we can deliver in the next month, 2 months from now, another report that builds on the progress we just made. And then, in 2 months, we also need to talk about what's going to contain in that fall report to the governor as to what we've accomplished and where we're going, just a program update. And so it'll be a good idea to sort of have that halfway check as to where we are, where we want to go, and what that report needs to look like. So I really appreciate your hard work and your staff, and we're doing our best to manage and coordinate this big project. So thank you.
At this time, we'll be moving on to the public engagement section of the agenda, item number 7. We have some people who have signed up to speak. So I'll ask that you come to the podium and speak into the microphone. We'll limit you to 2 minutes. Jeanette will be here holding up a time card to let you know when your time is nearing its completion. Thank you, Jeanette. So the first person we have listed is Nick Jimenez, followed by Daniel Parkhurst.
Hello, again, I'm Nick Jimenez, speaking on behalf of the Southern Environmental Law Center. First, we'd like to thank Governor Cooper for taking this important step towards addressing climate change and the cabinet agencies gathered here today for all the work you're doing and continue to do to meet the goals established in that order. We commend DEQ for producing a valuable GHG inventory in record time. As we work towards solutions, we must not lose sight of the sources of emissions identified in that inventory and examine all options for reducing emissions. For example, transportation produces nearly 1/3 of the GHGs emitted in the state. We certainly support the electric vehicle goal in the executive order, but increasing EV uptake alone will not get the emissions reductions we need. We must look further. We must re-examine legacy highway projects like the proposed Complete 540 toll road that increase vehicle miles traveled by encouraging sprawl and long commutes. As we saw from Mr. Bowman's slide earlier, BMTs continue to increase in the state. There are solutions the administration can begin working on now, ranging from the mundane to the exciting, at least for climate nerds. To reduce vehicle miles traveled, the state can begin by simply setting a VMT reduction goal. To maximize the emissions reduction potential of EVs and other equipment, the administration can ensure that charging equipment is outfitted with technology that can monitor the carbon intensity of electricity generation and schedule charging for low emission periods. And the administration could take advantage of the state's existing property assessed clean energy law by providing technical assistance to local governments, for example, by creating a statewide PACE authority. By leading the transition to clean energy sources, we can develop good paying jobs and boost local economies. And because the best places to take advantage of wind and solar resources are often in rural communities, this can be a great opportunity to help lift up rural North Carolinians. We look forward to continuing to work with the administration to make our efforts to address climate change a success. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Parkhurst, followed by Nita Coleman.
Again, thank you all for having this. This has been very productive and helpful for, I think, everyone in the room today. My name is Daniel Parkhurst. I'm the policy manager at Clean Air Carolina, a statewide nonprofit focused on protecting the air quality of this state. And I'm here to represent our membership from across the state and to address some specific comments made at the inaugural meeting of this council. At that meeting, the Chief Sustainability Officer of Enviva came to you with an appeal to include biomass, specifically wood pellets, as a part of the renewable portfolio of the Clean Energy Plan. And today, I would really like to implore you to please reject this proposal. She made bold claims about the carbon neutrality of the wood pellet industry, but these claims are based on an ideal. And in North Carolina today, the wood pellet industry is nowhere near carbon neutral. In fact, the expanded use of wood pellets would increase our emissions in greenhouse gases and directly undercut the executive order that we're all trying to support. If you've ever sat down at a campfire, you know wood does not burn cleanly. The burning of wood pellets generate electricity produces as much and often more carbon dioxide per unit of energy as coal. According to the Rachel Carson Council, biomass energy emits around 285% more CO2 than natural gas combined cycle plants. For biomass to truly be carbon neutral, it must be produced exclusively from byproducts and residues. However, Enviva and the wood pellet producers of this state often use farm plantations exclusively for wood pellet production and to replace bottom and hardwood forests with fast-growing pines that are not nearly as effective at carbon capture. In fact, it can take up to half a century for new trees to remove the carbon dioxide from the wood pellet process. Currently, nearly half of all bottomland hardwood forests lie within the sourcing perimeters of Enviva's 3 operational plants. Further, the harvesting and production of these generate harmful pollutants like VOCs, fine particulate matter, and in all 5 stages, and further hurt public health overall. So simply put, the wood pellet industry is a source of greenhouse gases in our state, and unless drastic changes are made in the current process of harvest and creation, it's on track to increase our overall emissions. And so I would implore you to please reject wood pellets as part of that portfolio. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nita Coleman, followed by Tom Adlet.
Tim.
I'm sorry.
Hi. Can you hear me okay? Welcome to the land of water, the wettest, lowest part of North Carolina. After being here all day listening to you, I realize I'm preaching to the choir, but I have a few thoughts to share with you. Sea level rise and changing weather plans are already affecting us here, just as they are in Hyde County. Our storms are more frequent and more severe. Flooding is more common. Water temperatures are rising. And for the first time in many, many years, we're having trouble with blue-green algae blooms on our rivers and creeks. In the years ahead, our biggest problems here are going to be with water. Water quality, water quantity, and water management. We desperately need the following: improved drainage infrastructure throughout this region, watershed plans that fit our changing conditions, conservation incentives for our vital wetlands and swamp forests, action to identify and address the drivers of these blue-green algal blooms, which are potentially harmful to human health. We've got a lot of bright folks here already working on some of these problems. We have 2 citizen science groups in the area collecting water samples from rivers and creeks, trying to uncover the causes and cures for our ailing waterways. We need state support to expand these efforts. We need more sampling stations. We need local laboratory services to analyze the samples. We need additional resources and staff for NCDEQ and also for Albemarle Resource Conservation and Development, who's leading these citizen science efforts. Climate change is going to affect all of us, no matter where we live, but here in the Albemarle region, we are on the front lines. That's why I'm asking you to make building coastal resilience a top priority. Thank you. I have 4 additional suggestions, and I included them in some written comments for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for that reminder. We are accepting written comments. You can leave them at the registration table. Mr. Adlet.
Thank you for your time and effort. Thank you, Mr. Wilson, for showing the importance of the State Park Trust Fund. I served on it from 04 to 10. Fortunate enough to be on there when we bought Chimney Rock and Grandfather Mountain. And if you'll talk to Tommy Burleson in Avery County, he'll tell you about why they have the purest streams in North Carolina, because of their riparian barriers and borders. So that's very important. I want to give you a little history lesson. I serve as chairman for the Pine Island project down in Corolla. Audubon is proud to be the voice for the birds. By analyzing our years of bird data, we understand where the most important places to protect birds are now and in the future. This analysis also tells us just how important North Carolina is to birds. We have close to 7,000 acres on both sides of Currituck Sound that are under conservation easements. We have a 2,600-acre Pine Island facility where we have a 1913 lodge, where we have 11 universities coming in on weekends and weekdays to hands-on research, water quality of Currituck Sound, marsh migration, and many other things that are deemed necessary to improve our environment. So once we get reach our goal of $7 million, we'll turn that into a premier research facility for Audubon, because this area is in the top 2% of all important birding areas on the entire East Coast. And our beach cottage in Kitty Hawk was moved back toward the road 3 times since 1934, but Ash Wednesday finally got it. So it's happening.
Thank you. Erin Carey, followed by Michelle Eidlet.
Good afternoon.
My name is Erin Carey. I represent the North Carolina Sierra Club. And on behalf of our 90,000 members and supporters across the state, I'd like to express support for the creation of this council and the critical importance of its mission. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm in Wilmington. That's where I'm based. And it's not by accident that we stand here today in one of the most storm-vulnerable cities on the East Coast. Elizabeth City and New Bern and Wilmington, these places were all in the news this past summer as Florence slammed into our state. Here at the coast, we've seen devastating storms create 2,000-year floods within a few years. We've seen the impact of sea level rise with coastal towns regularly flooding, the battleship, at high tide and beaches and estuaries eroding at an alarming rate. There's a lot we can do as a state to address the global emergency that is climate change. We need better science to prepare for storms, more accurate rainfall numbers that reflect a wetter reality, and we need updated estimates. Sorry, I can't read my own writing. Updated estimates of sea level rise. With the adoption of a zero-emissions fleet, we can reduce transportation emissions, and with smart regulation, we can reduce the impact of agricultural emissions. We can create an incentive program for private landowners to keep forests on their land instead of selling it to the wood pellet industry that is currently destroying our carbon sequestering power by clear-cutting hundreds of thousands of acres of our forests every year. We can reduce the impact of climate change on our state with resiliency planning, target conservation, and smart rebuilding. And we can't move fast enough on this issue. The Sierra Club offers its support to this council and its efforts to help North Carolina meet the goals set out in the executive order. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Eidlet.
Sorry, not that tall. Michelle Eidlet. I'm president of Almore Conservation Wildlife Chapter here, part of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. And I'm just speaking from the heart today. I don't have prepared statements. I've heard a lot of things about the effect of the community, the ecosystem, and I thank each of you for what you're doing with climate change. And I've heard also a lot on clean energy economy. And the one thing I have not heard that I would urge you to tell the governor to continue is to be opposed to the disastrous offshore drilling, because the effect on hunting, tourism, fishing, that affects all 20 of our coastal counties. This is called the graveyard of the Atlantic for a reason. It's not if an oil spill will happen, but when it will happen. Thank you.
Thank you. That's everyone who has signed up to speak. Was there anyone else in the room who wished to speak that didn't have an opportunity to sign up? In that case, Trish, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you to the public for being here and giving us your time and listening to what we have to say. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here another day. We got a lot to do, and I look forward to working with you again. Please give me ideas of where, when and where we should have the second or third meeting about 2 months from now. So thank you. And I'll let Jeremy say a few things if he wants to.
Sure. I'd encourage all of you in the audience and online to please reach out and offer your expertise and your input to the governor's office and to the agencies part of, in addition to everything that's been talked about in terms of what we're all actually doing, is to set up a transparent framework so when you care about an issue or you have expertise, you know who to talk